The brass keys felt cold against Marcus Rivera's palm as he stood before the towering wreckage of the Golden Mirage Casino, its broken neon sign flickering weakly against the desert twilight. The once magnificent resort stretched before him like a monument to failed dreams, its Art Deco facade cracked and weathered by 15 years of Nevada sun and neglect. Shattered windows stared down at him like hollow eyes, and tumbleweeds had claimed the circular driveway where Rolls-Royces and Bentleys once deposited high-rolling guests. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. His twin daughters, Sofia and Carmen, stood behind him with expressions that perfectly captured their 17-year-old disdain for what they considered their father's latest bout of terrible judgment. Sofia, always the more vocal of the two, broke the silence with a dramatic sigh that could have powered a small wind turbine. "Dad, this is seriously the most depressing thing I've ever seen," she announced, her voice carrying across the empty parking lot where weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. "Are we really supposed to live in this horror movie set?" Carmen, typically more diplomatic but equally unimpressed, adjusted her backpack and studied the casino's deteriorating exterior with the critical eye of someone who had inherited her father's engineering mind. "The structural damage looks extensive. Those support beams are showing stress fractures, and I can see water damage on at least 3 floors. She paused, consulting her phone's calculator. "Dad, the renovation costs alone would probably exceed whatever this place is worth." Marcus understood their frustration completely. 6 months ago, he had been a successful mechanical engineer at Hoover Dam, designing and maintaining the massive turbine systems that generated power for half the Southwest. His life had been predictable, comfortable, and secure. Then the budget cuts came, and 23 years of expertise became suddenly expendable. The severance package had lasted exactly 4 months, and his savings were nearly exhausted when the lawyer's letter arrived. The inheritance from his great-uncle Alejandro had seemed like divine intervention at first. Property in Nevada, the legal documents had promised, with significant historical and potential commercial value. Marcus had imagined a modest ranch house, maybe some desert acreage that could be sold to cover his mortgage payments while he searched for new employment. Instead, he found himself the reluctant owner of what the locals called the Ghost Palace, a failed casino resort that had been shuttered since 2009, when the economic collapse had taken down its parent company, along with half the gambling establishments in rural Nevada. The property taxes alone were staggering, and every real estate agent in a 50-mile radius had delivered the same verdict. Demolition would cost more than the land was worth. "Mr. Rivera?" The voice belonged to Janet Chen, the local real estate agent who had agreed to meet them despite her obvious reluctance to waste time on what she clearly considered an unsaleable property. Janet was a woman in her 50s, with the kind of relentless optimism that survived in small desert towns through sheer force of will, but even her professional enthusiasm seemed strained as she approached the casino's main entrance. "I know it doesn't look like much," Janet continued, producing a ring of keys that appeared to have been collected from a medieval dungeon, "but the bones of the building are solid. Art Deco construction from the 1940s, expanded in the 1980s when gambling was legalized. The original structure was built to last." Sofia snorted with laughter. "Built to last?" "It looks like it's held together with duct tape and wishful thinking." Janet's smile never wavered, though Marcus noticed a slight twitch around her left eye. "The exterior needs work, certainly, but the interior spaces are quite remarkable. Your great-uncle Alejandro was apparently quite the collector. The property comes fully furnished with all original fixtures, artwork, and gaming equipment." The massive front doors required both Janet and Marcus working together to force them open, their hinges protesting with the kind of screech that suggested they hadn't moved in years. The lobby that greeted them was a time capsule from an era when gambling establishments aspired to genuine elegance rather than theme park spectacle. Soaring ceilings rose 30 feet above their heads, supported by marble columns that had somehow survived the years of neglect with their dignity intact. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car hung from the center of the space, its thousands of individual pieces catching and reflecting the late afternoon sunlight that streamed through windows set high in the walls. The floor was an intricate mosaic of Italian marble, depicting scenes of desert wildlife and Native American symbols in patterns that must have taken craftsmen months to complete. But it was the silence that struck Marcus most powerfully. The casino floor stretched beyond the lobby, filled with rows of slot machines covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts, their digital displays dark and lifeless. Gaming tables sat abandoned under dust covers, their felt surfaces hidden, but their elegant wooden construction still visible around the edges. The entire space felt like a cathedral dedicated to chance and fortune, now empty of worshippers but retaining an echo of its former glory. Carmen's attitude shifted noticeably as she examined the lobby's architectural details. "Dad, look at these columns. That's real Carrara marble, not some synthetic substitute. And the inlay work on the floor, those patterns are hand-cut, probably from the original construction." Her engineering mind was clearly engaged, despite her earlier skepticism. Sofia remained unimpressed. "It's still a creepy, abandoned casino in the middle of nowhere. What are we supposed to do, start a ghost tour business?" Janet led them deeper into the building, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of the main gaming floor. The property includes the casino, obviously, plus a 200-room hotel tower, 3 restaurants, a theater that seats 800, and a conference center. In its heyday, the Golden Mirage was considered one of the premier destinations in Nevada outside of Las Vegas. "What happened to it?" Marcus asked, stepping carefully around a covered blackjack table. "Several things, really. The 2008 financial crisis hit rural casinos particularly hard. People stopped taking gambling vacations, and the high-end clientele that places like this depended on simply disappeared. The parent company was over-leveraged and went bankrupt. There were some legal complications with the ownership transfer, and by the time everything was sorted out, the place had been sitting empty for years." They climbed a service staircase to reach the hotel levels, their footsteps echoing in the narrow concrete stairwell. The hotel corridors stretched in both directions, lined with doors that led to rooms Marcus couldn't afford to furnish, even if the building were in perfect condition. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate, casting long shadows that made every corner seem to hide potential disasters. "The electrical system was updated in 2007, Janet continued, her voice taking on the desperate cheer of someone trying to find selling points in a hopeless situation. "And the plumbing was completely redone at the same time. The infrastructure is actually quite sound." Marcus pushed open the door to one of the hotel rooms and immediately understood why Janet's optimism was struggling. The room had been elegant once, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the desert landscape. But years of temperature fluctuations had warped the wooden furniture, and water stains on the ceiling suggested that the roof's condition was worse than the exterior inspection had revealed. Sofia appeared in the doorway behind him, her expression a mixture of horror and fascination. "It's like the Overlook Hotel, but with slot machines instead of hedge animals." The first real clue that the Golden Mirage held secrets beyond its obvious decay came when Marcus discovered that his great-uncle Alejandro's personal quarters weren't just hotel rooms, but a private apartment that occupied an entire floor of the building's western tower. Janet had mentioned the space almost as an afterthought, treating it as merely another complication in an already complicated inheritance. "Your great-uncle lived on-site for the last 5 years the casino was operational," she explained as they rode the service elevator to the 15th floor. "He was apparently quite involved in the day-to-day operations, which was unusual for someone in his position." The elevator opened directly into what had once been an elegant foyer, complete with marble flooring that matched the lobby's craftsmanship and original oil paintings that depicted scenes of the American Southwest. Unlike the abandoned hotel rooms they'd explored, Alejandro's apartment showed signs of recent habitation and careful maintenance. The living space was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered commanding views of the desert in 3 directions. The furniture was clearly expensive, a mixture of authentic Southwestern pieces and modern convenience that suggested someone with both refined taste and substantial resources. Most surprisingly, the apartment appeared to have been recently cleaned and organized, as if someone had been expecting visitors. Carmen was immediately drawn to a wall of built-in bookshelves that contained what appeared to be several hundred volumes on subjects ranging from architecture and engineering to Nevada history and mining geology. "Dad, look at this collection." Great-Uncle Alejandro was apparently way more educated than anyone mentioned. Marcus had been examining a series of framed photographs that lined the mantelpiece above a massive stone fireplace. The images showed the Golden Mirage during its operational years, filled with elegantly dressed guests and bustling with activity. But it was the man who appeared in several of the photos that caught his attention, a distinguished figure in expensive suits, who seemed to command respect from everyone around him. "Janet, is this Alejandro?" Marcus asked, pointing to the photographs. The real estate agent studied the images with obvious surprise. "I? Well, I assume so. I never actually met your great-uncle personally. The property management was handled through lawyers and holding companies." She paused, looking more closely at the photographs. "He certainly looks like someone who belonged in a place like this." Sofia had discovered something far more interesting than family photographs. In what appeared to be Alejandro's study, she found a desk that belonged in a museum, an enormous piece of hand-carved mahogany with brass fittings and secret compartments that opened when she pressed hidden mechanisms in the wood grain. "This is incredible," Sofia announced, her earlier disdain temporarily forgotten. "It's like something out of a spy movie. Look, there are hidden drawers everywhere, and they're all full of stuff." The stuff turned out to be a collection of documents, maps, and mechanical drawings that suggested Alejandro's interests had extended far beyond casino management. Marcus found detailed architectural plans for the Golden Mirage that showed modifications and additions that weren't visible from their cursory exploration. More intriguingly, he discovered correspondence with mining companies, geological surveys, and engineering firms that specialized in underground construction. Carmen joined her sister at the desk, her engineering background helping her interpret the technical drawings. "Dad, these aren't just building plans. Some of these documents are showing excavation work, underground chambers, and what looks like some kind of industrial installation beneath the casino." Underground installation. Marcus moved to examine the drawings more closely. The plans showed the Golden Mirage's basement levels, but they also depicted additional spaces that extended much deeper into the desert bedrock than any casino would normally require. The drawings included ventilation systems, electrical infrastructure, and what appeared to be specialized equipment rooms. Janet Chen looked increasingly uncomfortable as the family discovered more evidence of Alejandro's mysterious projects. "I should mention," she said carefully, "that there were some unusual clauses in the inheritance documents. Your great-uncle apparently left specific instructions about certain areas of the property that are. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Restricted. Restricted how? Marcus asked. I'm not entirely sure. The lawyers mentioned something about private spaces that were to remain sealed until the proper heir could be identified and certain conditions were met. Janet's professional demeanor was slipping, revealing genuine nervousness about aspects of the inheritance that she clearly didn't understand. The conversation was interrupted by Carmen's discovery of what appeared to be a key ring hidden in one of the desk's secret compartments. The keys were unlike anything Marcus had seen in conventional architecture. Heavy brass pieces with intricate patterns that suggested they opened locks of considerable sophistication. These don't look like normal building keys, Carmen observed, examining the craftsmanship with obvious fascination. The metalwork is incredibly detailed, and the weight suggests they're opening something substantial. Sofia was studying a map that she'd found alongside the keys, a detailed diagram of the Golden Mirage's layout that included areas they hadn't explored and spaces that didn't correspond to the building plans Janet had shown them. According to this, there are entire sections of this place that we haven't seen. Look, there are passages and rooms that aren't on any of the regular floor plans. The map showed the casino and hotel as merely the visible portion of a much larger complex. Below the main gaming floor, additional levels were marked with symbols and notations that suggested spaces designed for purposes far removed from entertainment and hospitality. Some areas were labeled with terms that Marcus recognized from his engineering background: primary generation, control systems, and storage vault alpha. Janet, Marcus said, his voice carrying a new intensity. What exactly did my great-uncle do for a living? The real estate agent's discomfort was now impossible to hide. Officially, he was listed as the casino's general manager and part owner, but there were always rumors about other business interests. Some people said he was involved in mining, others claimed he worked with government contractors. She paused, clearly debating how much to reveal. The truth is, nobody in town really knew what Alejandro Rivera did, but everyone knew he had resources that went far beyond what a casino manager should have had. As afternoon turned to evening, the family continued their exploration of Alejandro's private quarters, uncovering more evidence of a man whose public persona as a casino operator had concealed interests and activities of considerably greater complexity. They found journals written in a mixture of English and Spanish, detailing experiments and projects that seemed to combine elements of mining engineering, energy generation, and something that Marcus's technical background couldn't immediately classify. The journals referenced the primary installation, with a frequency that suggested it was central to whatever Alejandro had been working on. Entries described extraction rates, processing efficiency, and storage capacity, in terms that reminded Marcus of the industrial systems he'd worked with at Hoover Dam, but applied to purposes that remained frustratingly unclear. "Dad, look at this entry," Sofia said, reading from one of the more recent journals. "It's dated just 6 months ago. The installation has exceeded all projected performance parameters. Storage levels have reached capacity limits, and the processing systems continue to operate at optimal efficiency. The family heir will need extensive preparation to understand and maintain the operation, but the foundation is now complete." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. 6 months ago was exactly when his employment situation had begun to deteriorate, when the budget cuts had started targeting his department. The timing felt less like coincidence and more like coordination, as if Alejandro had been monitoring his great-nephew's circumstances and timing his inheritance accordingly. Carmen had found something that made the mystery even more compelling. In a locked filing cabinet that opened with one of the ornate keys, she discovered financial documents that suggested the Golden Mirage's failure had been far from complete. Bank statements and investment records showed accounts with balances that made Marcus's engineering salary look like pocket change, along with ongoing income from sources that were identified only by numeric codes. "Dad, I think great-uncle Alejandro was way more successful than anyone realized," Carmen said, spreading the financial documents across the desk. "These accounts show millions of dollars in assets, and the income streams are continuing even after the casino closed." The implications were staggering. If Alejandro had indeed been generating substantial income from activities unrelated to the casino's operation, then the property's apparent worthlessness might be an elaborate disguise concealing something of genuine value. The underground installations shown in the architectural plans began to seem less like basement storage and more like the infrastructure for an ongoing business operation. Sofia had moved to the apartment's extensive windows, watching the desert landscape as the last light of day faded into the kind of spectacular sunset that made Nevada's remoteness seem like an advantage rather than a liability. "You know what's weird?" she said. "This place doesn't feel abandoned. I mean, the casino downstairs is obviously closed, but up here, it feels like someone's been taking care of everything." She was right. The apartment's climate control system was operating efficiently, maintaining comfortable temperatures despite the desert's extreme temperature fluctuations. The electrical systems were functioning perfectly, and even the water pressure in the bathrooms suggested that the building's infrastructure was in far better condition than its exterior appearance indicated. Marcus was beginning to understand that inheriting the Golden Mirage was considerably more complex than inheriting a failed business. Alejandro had left him something that combined the appearance of a liability with evidence of substantial hidden assets, wrapped in mysteries that would require serious investigation to unravel. As they prepared to leave the apartment and return to their motel in the nearest town, Marcus made a decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of accepting the conventional wisdom about the casino's worthlessness, he would treat the inheritance as an engineering problem to be solved through systematic investigation and analysis. "Girls," he said, gathering the keys and documents they'd discovered, "we're not selling this place until we understand what great-uncle Alejandro was really doing here." Sofia and Carmen exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to share their father's curiosity despite their initial skepticism. The Golden Mirage was revealing itself to be far more than a failed casino, and the mystery of Alejandro's true activities was just beginning to unfold. The locked basement door stood at the end of a service corridor that Marcus had initially dismissed as leading to mechanical rooms and storage areas. Unlike the ornate entrances that graced the casino's public spaces, this door was steel, institutional, and secured, with a locking mechanism that belonged in a bank vault rather than an entertainment venue. When Marcus tried the largest of Alejandro's ornate keys, The lock opened with a series of mechanical clicks that suggested precision engineering and recent maintenance. The staircase beyond descended much farther than the basement level Marcus had expected, illuminated by industrial lighting that activated automatically as they moved deeper into the bedrock beneath the casino. The walls were reinforced concrete rather than the decorative materials used in the building's public areas, and the air carried a subtle electrical hum that reminded Marcus of the power generation facilities where he'd spent his career. "Dad, this is starting to feel less like a basement and more like some kind of underground facility," Carmen observed, her voice echoing in the concrete stairwell. Her engineering instincts were clearly engaged, and she was examining the construction details with obvious professional interest. Sofia remained skeptical but curious. Why would a casino need something like this? I mean, what legitimate business requires secret underground passages? The staircase terminated at another steel door, this one marked with warnings in multiple languages about authorized personnel only and potential electrical hazards. Beyond that door, Marcus discovered spaces that transformed his understanding of what Alejandro had been operating beneath the Golden Mirage's gambling floors. The first chamber was enormous, easily the size of the casino's main gaming floor but buried 20 feet underground. The space was filled with equipment that Marcus immediately recognized as industrial machinery, though its specific purpose remained unclear. Massive cylindrical containers lined one wall, connected by pipes and conduits to processing equipment that hummed with purposeful activity. Digital displays showed operational parameters for systems that were clearly running continuously, maintained by automated processes that had kept them functioning long after the casino above had closed. "This is incredible," Marcus said, examining the nearest piece of equipment with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades working with complex mechanical systems. "This isn't casino equipment. This is industrial processing machinery, and it's all running perfectly." Carmen was studying the digital readouts with fascination. "Dad, these systems are monitoring something called extraction efficiency and processing throughput. It looks like they're refining or processing some kind of raw material." The mystery deepened as they explored additional chambers that branched off from the main processing area. One room contained what appeared to be a sophisticated control center, with multiple computer workstations and monitoring systems that tracked the underground facility's various operations. Banks of servers hummed quietly in climate-controlled cabinets, their displays showing data streams and operational parameters that suggested the facility was conducting complex automated processes. Sofia discovered something that made the operations scale even more impressive. In what appeared to be a storage area, she found containers labeled with symbols and codes that suggested the facility was producing or processing materials of considerable value. The containers were sealed and clearly designed for long-term storage, stacked in organized rows that extended deeper into the underground complex than their initial exploration had revealed. "Dad, there are hundreds of these containers," Sofia reported, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. "Whatever this operation is producing, they're stockpiling massive quantities of it." Marcus was beginning to recognize elements of the system that resembled the power generation and industrial processes he'd worked with throughout his career, but applied to purposes that remained frustratingly unclear. The facility's scale and sophistication suggested years of development and substantial investment, far beyond what a casino operator should have been able to afford or justify. The breakthrough came when Carmen discovered a technical manual that had been left open at a workstation in the control center. The document was titled Rare Earth Element Extraction and Processing, Underground Operations Manual, and its contents revealed the true nature of Alejandro's enterprise. "Dad, I think Great-Uncle Alejandro was running a mining operation," Carmen said, her voice filled with amazement as she read through the manual's specifications. "Not gold or silver, but rare earth elements. The kind of materials that are essential for electronics, renewable energy systems, and advanced manufacturing." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Rare earth elements were among the most valuable materials in the modern economy, essential components in everything from smartphones to wind turbines. More importantly, they were materials that China had largely monopolized, creating supply chain vulnerabilities that made alternative sources extraordinarily valuable. The processing facility beneath the Golden Mirage wasn't just extracting these materials from the desert bedrock, it was refining them to industrial specifications and storing them in quantities that represented millions of dollars in market value. The casino above had been perfect cover for an operation that required substantial infrastructure, but needed to avoid the attention that traditional mining operations attracted. "Look at these production reports," Sofia said, discovering files that documented the facility's output over several years. "The system has been extracting and processing rare earth elements continuously, building up stockpiles that are worth— Dad, I can't even calculate how much this is worth." Marcus was studying the extraction technology with growing admiration for his great-uncle's engineering capabilities. The system used advanced chemical processes to separate valuable elements from desert minerals, producing refined materials that met the exacting specifications required by high-tech manufacturing. The operation was completely automated, requiring minimal human intervention and producing no visible surface disturbance that would attract regulatory attention. The financial implications were staggering. Rare earth elements commanded premium prices in global markets, and the United States had been increasingly concerned about supply chain security as geopolitical tensions with China intensified. A domestic source of these critical materials would be valuable beyond conventional calculation, especially one that was already operational and producing refined products ready for industrial use. But it was the discovery of Alejandro's private office within the underground complex that revealed the full scope of his vision and the challenges that Marcus would face in continuing the operation. The office was a sophisticated command center that monitored not just the local extraction and processing systems, but global market conditions, regulatory developments, and geopolitical factors that affected rare earth element supply chains. Wall-mounted displays showed real-time market data, commodity prices, and news feeds focused on international trade and technology policy. Alejandro had been operating not just as a mining engineer, but as a strategic analyst who understood the broader implications of his underground facility and its potential impact on American industrial capacity. The office also contained correspondence with government agencies, defense contractors, and technology companies that suggested Alejandro had been preparing to bring his operation into the open under the right circumstances. Letters from Pentagon procurement officials indicated interest in secure domestic sources of rare earth elements. Communications with renewable energy companies showed potential contracts for materials essential to wind turbine and solar panel manufacturing. "Dad, Great-Uncle Alejandro wasn't just running a mining operation," Carmen said, reading through the correspondence files. "He was positioning himself to become a strategic supplier for American defense and energy independence. This isn't just about money, it's about national security." Marcus was beginning to understand that inheriting the Golden Mirage meant inheriting responsibilities far beyond managing a failed casino. Alejandro had spent years developing an operation that could reduce American dependence on Chinese rare earth element supplies, but he'd structured it as a private enterprise that could navigate regulatory complexities while maintaining operational security. The underground facility represented a solution to one of America's most pressing industrial vulnerabilities. Disguised as a failed gambling establishment in the Nevada desert, the casino's apparent worthlessness was perfect camouflage for an operation that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars while serving critical national interests. As they prepared to return to the surface, Marcus found a sealed envelope in Alejandro's desk drawer, marked with his name in his great-uncle's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter that explained everything they'd discovered and revealed the magnitude of what Marcus had inherited. "My dear great-nephew," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you have found the heart of what I built beneath the Golden Mirage. What you see around you is not just a mining operation, but a strategic asset that can serve both your family's financial future and your country's industrial independence." The casino was always just a cover story, a way to establish and maintain an operation that required discretion and long-term thinking. The letter continued with technical details about the extraction and processing systems, financial information about the accumulated stockpiles, and, most importantly, contacts within government and industry who were positioned to help Marcus transition the operation from hidden asset to legitimate strategic supplier. "The timing of your inheritance is not coincidental," Alejandro had written. "Your engineering background and recent employment situation create the perfect circumstances for someone who can understand the technical challenges while having the motivation to pursue the opportunities. The facility is ready for expansion, the markets are eager for reliable domestic supply, and the political climate has never been more favorable for operations like ours." As they climbed the concrete staircase back toward the casino's main level, Marcus felt the weight of inherited responsibility settling on his shoulders. Alejandro had given him more than a property or even a business. He'd given him the foundation for an operation that could influence America's technological and economic future while generating wealth that exceeded his most optimistic dreams. The Golden Mirage was revealing itself to be the opposite of everything it appeared. What looked like a liability was actually an asset. What seemed like failure was actually the foundation for unprecedented success. And what appeared to be the end of Marcus's career might actually be the beginning of something far more significant than anything he'd previously imagined. Sofia and Carmen walked beside him in thoughtful silence, processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. The inheritance that had seemed like a burden was transforming into an opportunity that could change their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. Above them, the casino's empty gaming floor waited in darkness, its abandoned slot machines and covered tables concealing the entrance to an operation that could redefine their family's future while serving their country's strategic interests. The next phase of their inheritance would require courage, intelligence, and determination, but the foundation that Alejandro had built was solid, profitable, and ready for the next generation to carry it forward. The phone call that changed everything came at 6:30 in the morning, 3 days after Marcus and his daughters had discovered the underground rare earth processing facility. Marcus had been reviewing Alejandro's technical manuals in the casino's abandoned restaurant, trying to understand the full scope of the operation he'd inherited, when his cell phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Rivera? This is Victoria Sterling from Sterling & Associates Legal Services. I represent certain interests that have been monitoring the Golden Mirage property. We need to meet immediately." Marcus felt his engineering instincts kick in, the same careful attention to unexpected variables that had served him well in managing complex power systems. "What kind of interests, and why the urgency?" "The kind that prefer discretion, Mr. Rivera. Let's just say that your great-uncle's activities attracted attention from parties who have significant resources and very specific concerns about the continuation of certain operations." Sterling's voice carried the particular authority that came with expensive legal training and powerful clients. "Can you be at the Sagebrush Diner on Route 95 in 1 hour?" Against his better judgment, Marcus agreed to the meeting. He left Sofia and Carmen at the casino with strict instructions to stay in the public areas and avoid the underground facility until he returned. The drive to the diner gave him time to process the implications of Sterling's call. Someone with substantial resources had been watching the Golden Mirage, and Alejandro's death had apparently triggered their interest in making contact. The Sagebrush Diner was exactly the kind of establishment that served as neutral ground for conversations that required privacy. Located at a truck stop 20 miles from the nearest town, it offered the anonymity of constant traveler traffic and the practical advantage of multiple exit routes. Victoria Sterling was waiting in a corner booth, a woman in her 40s whose expensive business suit looked distinctly out of place among the long-haul truckers and desert locals. "Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming," Sterling said, gesturing for Marcus to sit across from her. "I'll be direct because time is a factor here. My clients represent a consortium of mining companies and technology manufacturers who have been aware of your great-uncle's operation for some time." Marcus kept his expression neutral while his mind raced through the implications. "I'm not sure what operation you're referring to." Sterling smiled with the practiced patience of someone who negotiated high-stakes deals for a living. "The rare earth element extraction and processing facility beneath the Golden Mirage Casino, the operation that has been producing refined materials worth approximately $15 million annually for the past 8 years." The specific financial figures were accurate enough to prove that Sterling's clients had detailed knowledge of Alejandro's underground business. Marcus realized that the operation's secrecy had been compromised long before his inheritance, and powerful interests had been waiting for the right moment to make their move. "What do your clients want?" Marcus asked. "A partnership that would be mutually beneficial. Your great-uncle was brilliant, but he was also operating as a single individual with limited resources and constant regulatory risks. My clients can provide the capital, legal protection, and market access that would allow the operation to expand by a factor of 10, while ensuring that all parties profit substantially." Sterling slid a folder across the table containing what appeared to be a preliminary partnership proposal. The financial projections were staggering, showing potential annual revenues that would make Marcus wealthy beyond anything he'd previously imagined. The legal structure would provide comprehensive protection from regulatory challenges, while ensuring access to government and military contracts that individual operators could never secure. "The offer is generous," Marcus said, scanning the documents, But I'm curious why you're approaching me now instead of working with Alejandro directly. Your great-uncle was difficult to work with. He was protective of his operation and suspicious of outside involvement. He preferred to maintain complete control even if it limited his growth potential. Sterling paused, studying Marcus's reaction. We're hoping that someone with your professional background might be more open to collaboration. Marcus was beginning to understand that Alejandro's inheritance timing had been even more strategic than he'd realized. His great-uncle had apparently been resisting pressure from powerful interests, maintaining independence at the cost of limiting the operation's expansion. By transferring ownership to Marcus at a moment when he needed income and had the technical background to understand the opportunity, Alejandro had created a situation where partnership might seem attractive. I appreciate the offer, Marcus said carefully, but I need time to fully understand what I've inherited before making any commitments. Sterling's expression shifted subtly, revealing the steel beneath her professional courtesy. Mr. Rivera, I hope you understand that time may not be a luxury you can afford. The rare earth element market is highly competitive, and operations like your great-uncle's exist in regulatory gray areas that can become problematic very quickly. The threat was politely delivered, but unmistakable. Marcus was being offered a choice between partnership and potential legal or regulatory obstacles that could shut down the operation entirely. The consortium Sterling represented had the resources to either support his success or engineer his failure, and they were making clear which outcome they preferred. How long do I have to consider your proposal? Marcus asked. 48 hours should be sufficient for someone with your technical background to understand the situation and recognize the advantages of cooperation. Marcus left the meeting with a clear understanding that inheriting the Golden Mirage had placed him in the middle of a high-stakes business situation that extended far beyond his family's financial future. Powerful interests were positioning themselves to benefit from Alejandro's work, and Marcus's role would be determined by how skillfully he could navigate the pressures and opportunities that came with controlling a strategic resource. The drive back to the casino gave him time to analyze the situation using the systematic approach that had served him well in engineering complex power systems. Sterling's consortium clearly had detailed knowledge of the underground operation, substantial financial resources, and the legal connections necessary to influence regulatory decisions. They were offering partnership terms that would make Marcus wealthy while potentially limiting his control over an operation that Alejandro had spent years developing independently. The alternative to partnership appeared to be regulatory pressure that could shut down the operation entirely, destroying both its current value and its future potential. Marcus was facing the classic dilemma of independent operators in industries dominated by large corporate interests. Accept limited autonomy in exchange for security and resources, or maintain independence at the risk of losing everything. When Marcus returned to the Golden Mirage, he found Sofia and Carmen in Alejandro's apartment, surrounded by additional documents they'd discovered while exploring areas they hadn't previously examined thoroughly. Their expressions suggested they'd found something significant during his absence. The letters show that he was working with other independent operators to create a network that could compete with the big mining companies. Marcus was beginning to understand that the choice Sterling had presented wasn't just about his family's financial future, but about the structure of an entire industry. Accepting the consortium's partnership would mean joining a consolidation process that was eliminating independent alternatives to corporate control over strategic materials. Refusing their offer would mean continuing Alejandro's resistance to forces that had the resources and determination to make independent operation extremely difficult. The safe contained one final document that clarified the stakes involved in Marcus's decision. Alejandro had prepared a detailed analysis of the rare earth element market. That showed how corporate consolidation was creating supply chain vulnerabilities that threatened American technological and defense capabilities. Independent operators like the Golden Mirage weren't just business alternatives. They were strategic assets that could provide supply diversity in an industry increasingly dominated by foreign corporations and domestic monopolies. Your great-uncle believed that independent operators were essential for national security, Carmen said, reading from Alejandro's market analysis. He argued that concentrating rare earth element production in the hands of a few large corporations created the same vulnerabilities as depending on foreign suppliers. Marcus realized that Alejandro's inheritance had given him more than a profitable business opportunity. It had made him a participant in a larger struggle over the control of materials that were essential to America's technological future. The consortium's partnership offer represented the path of least resistance, but it also meant surrendering the independence that Alejandro had fought to maintain. The implications extended beyond business considerations to questions of principle and national interest. Marcus had to decide whether to preserve Alejandro's vision of independent operation or accept the financial security that came with corporate partnership. The decision would determine not just his family's future, but the fate of one of the few remaining independent sources of strategic materials in American industry. That evening, as Marcus reviewed the documents and correspondence Sofia and Carmen had discovered, he found a sealed letter addressed specifically to him that Alejandro had placed in the deepest recess of the safe. The letter contained his great-uncle's final thoughts about the pressures and opportunities that would confront whoever inherited the Golden Mirage operation. "Marcus," the letter began, "by the time you read this, you will have been contacted by representatives of the consortium that has been trying to acquire control of our operation for years. They will present their offer as an opportunity, but you should understand it as the culmination of a campaign to eliminate independent alternatives in the rare earth element industry." Alejandro's letter continued with detailed explanations of the regulatory pressures, legal challenges, and financial obstacles that independent operators faced when powerful corporate interests decided to force consolidation. The consortium's tactics were legal but relentless, designed to make independent operations so difficult and expensive that partnership became the only viable alternative. "The choice you face is not simply between wealth and independence," Alejandro had written. "It is between preserving alternatives and accepting monopolization. The rare earth elements we extract and process are essential to technologies that will define America's future. If control over these materials becomes concentrated in the hands of a few large corporations, our country's technological independence will be compromised." The letter concluded with practical advice about maintaining independence while managing the pressures that would certainly intensify as the consortium realized that Marcus was not immediately accepting their partnership offer. Alejandro had prepared contingency plans, established relationships with government agencies that valued supply diversity, and created legal structures that could protect the operation from regulatory pressure. "You have advantages that I never possessed," the letter explained. "Your engineering background gives you credibility with government agencies that value technical expertise. Your recent employment situation demonstrates that you understand the challenges facing American industrial workers. Most importantly, your inheritance comes at a time when national security concerns about supply chain independence are receiving unprecedented political attention." As Marcus finished reading his great-uncle's final guidance, he understood that the decision facing him would define not just his own future, but the continuation of Alejandro's larger vision for maintaining alternatives to corporate control over strategic resources. The Golden Mirage represented more than a business opportunity. It was a test of whether independent operation could survive in an industry increasingly dominated by consolidated interests. The 48-hour deadline Sterling had imposed was approaching, and Marcus needed to decide whether to preserve his great-uncle's independence or accept the security that came with corporate partnership. The choice would determine the direction of his family's future and his role in the larger struggle over control of materials essential to America's technological capabilities. The decision required courage, strategic thinking, and a clear understanding of the forces arrayed on both sides of the consolidation battle. Marcus had inherited more than a profitable operation. He had inherited a responsibility to continue Alejandro's resistance to pressures that threatened to eliminate alternatives in a strategically critical industry. The encrypted hard drive that Carmen discovered in a climate-controlled cabinet within Alejandro's underground control center contained information that elevated the stakes of Marcus's inheritance far beyond anything they'd previously imagined. The drive required a password that Sofia found hidden in one of Alejandro's journals, written in a code that used family birthdays and significant dates to create a complex but decipherable sequence. The files on the drive revealed that Alejandro's rare earth element operation was part of a larger network of independent strategic resource producers that had been coordinating their activities to maintain alternatives to corporate monopolization. The network included operations extracting lithium in Nevada, processing titanium in Montana, and refining cobalt in Alaska, all working to preserve American access to materials essential for advanced manufacturing and defense applications. "Dad, this is incredible," Carmen said, reading through the network communications files. Great-uncle Alejandro wasn't just running an independent mining operation. He was part of a coordinated effort to maintain strategic resource diversity across multiple critical materials. The network had been operating discreetly for years, sharing technical innovations, coordinating market strategies, and providing mutual support when individual operations faced regulatory or competitive pressures. More significantly, they had established relationships with defense contractors, technology companies, and government agencies that valued supply chain independence and were willing to pay premium prices for domestically sourced strategic materials. Marcus recognized the sophistication of what Alejandro had helped create. The network represented a systematic alternative to corporate consolidation, structured to provide both economic viability and strategic value. Individual operations maintained their independence while benefiting from collective resources and market access that no single producer could achieve alone. Sofia had found correspondence that showed the network's members had been under increasing pressure from the same consortium that Sterling represented. The pattern was consistent across all the operations. Initial partnership offers, followed by escalating regulatory challenges, designed to force compliance or shut down independent alternatives entirely. Look at these letters from the other network members, Sofia said. The lithium operation in Nevada was forced to accept partnership terms after 2 years of permit disputes. The titanium processor in Montana is facing environmental lawsuits that could force them to cease operations. Great-uncle Alejandro was apparently one of the last holdouts. The files revealed that Alejandro's resistance had made the Golden Mirage operation particularly valuable to the network's survival. As other independent producers were forced into corporate partnerships or shut down entirely, Alejandro's continued independence had become essential for maintaining alternatives in the strategic materials supply chain. Marcus was beginning to understand that accepting Sterling's partnership offer would mean more than surrendering his own operations' independence. It would eliminate one of the few remaining nodes in a network that provided strategic alternatives to corporate monopolization of critical materials. The decision would affect not just his family's future, but America's capacity to maintain technological independence. The encrypted files also contained technical information that explained why the consortium was so determined to acquire control over independent operations. Alejandro and his network partners had developed processing innovations that were significantly more efficient than the techniques used by large-scale corporate operations. Their smaller scale allowed for flexibility and optimization that massive industrial facilities couldn't match. These efficiency improvements are substantial, Carmen said, analyzing the technical specifications. The network members have been sharing innovations that allow them to extract higher yields, process materials to better specifications, and reduce environmental impact compared to conventional large-scale operations. The technical advantages meant that independent operations like the Golden Mirage weren't just alternatives to corporate producers. They were superior alternatives that could provide better products at competitive prices while maintaining the flexibility to respond quickly to changing market conditions and customer requirements. Marcus realized that the consortium's determination to force partnerships wasn't simply about eliminating competition. It was about preventing independent operators from demonstrating that smaller, more efficient operations could outperform the massive industrial facilities that large corporations had invested billions of dollars to construct. The discovery of the network files was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Elena Rodriguez appeared at the casino's main entrance, a woman in her 30s with the kind of practical competence that suggested extensive experience in challenging environments. She introduced herself as a representative of the Strategic Materials Independence Initiative, a government program that Marcus had never heard of but which apparently had been working with Alejandro's network for several years. Mr. Rivera, I apologize for arriving unannounced, but recent developments have made it necessary for us to accelerate our timeline, Rodriguez said, producing credentials that identified her as a Defense Department liaison specializing in supply chain security. Your great-uncle's operation has been providing materials for several critical defense programs, and his death has created supply uncertainties that require immediate attention. Rodriguez explained that the Defense Department had been quietly supporting independent strategic materials producers as part of a broader effort to reduce American dependence on foreign suppliers and corporate monopolies. Alejandro's rare earth element operation had been a key component of this strategy, providing materials for advanced weapons systems, communication equipment, and aerospace applications. The consortium that has been pressuring you represents interests that are not entirely aligned with American strategic needs, Rodriguez continued. Some of their major investors include foreign entities that would prefer to maintain American dependence on overseas suppliers rather than supporting domestic alternatives. The revelation added a national security dimension to Marcus's decision that he hadn't previously considered. Accepting the consortium's partnership offer might mean allowing foreign interests to gain influence over American strategic materials production, while maintaining independence could serve broader national interests in supply chain security. Rodriguez had brought documents that formalized the Defense Department's interest in continuing their relationship with the Golden Mirage operation. The agreements offered guaranteed purchase contracts, regulatory protection, and technical support that would allow Marcus to expand the operation while maintaining its independence and strategic value. The Department of Defense is authorized to provide substantial support for operations that serve critical national security needs, Rodriguez explained. Your great-uncle's extraction and processing capabilities are exactly what we need to reduce dependence on potentially unreliable foreign suppliers. Sofia and Carmen joined the conversation, bringing the network files they'd been analyzing and sharing their discoveries about the broader pattern of pressure facing independent strategic materials producers. Rodriguez confirmed their analysis and provided additional context about the geopolitical implications of corporate consolidation in strategic industries. What you've inherited isn't just a business opportunity, Rodriguez told Marcus. It's a strategic asset that could influence America's technological and defense capabilities for decades. The choice you make about partnership versus independence will determine whether we maintain alternatives to corporate and foreign control over materials that are essential to our national security. The meeting with Rodriguez clarified the broader implications of Marcus's inheritance and the forces arrayed on different sides of his decision. The consortium Sterling represented offered financial security but potential compromise of strategic independence. The Defense Department offered government support and guaranteed markets, but required continued operation as an independent alternative to corporate consolidation. As Rodriguez prepared to leave, she provided Marcus with contact information for government agencies and defense contractors that could provide both technical assistance and market access for an independent operation. The support network was extensive and sophisticated, designed to help domestic producers compete successfully against both foreign suppliers and large corporate operations. Mr. Rivera, your great-uncle spent years building relationships and capabilities that serve both commercial and strategic objectives, Rodriguez said. The decision you make will determine whether his work continues to serve American interests or becomes absorbed into corporate structures that may not share those priorities. That evening, Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of choosing between three different paths for his inherited operation. He could accept the consortium's partnership offer and gain financial security at the cost of independence and strategic value. He could work with the Defense Department to maintain independence while serving national security objectives. Or he could attempt to navigate independently, preserving complete autonomy while facing the regulatory and competitive pressures that had challenged Alejandro for years. Each option carried distinct advantages and risks. The consortium offered immediate financial benefits but potential long-term constraints. The Defense Department offered protection and guaranteed markets but required compliance with government objectives and oversight. Independent operation offered complete autonomy but required successfully managing pressures that had challenged even Alejandro's considerable capabilities. The decision would determine not just Marcus's family's financial future, but his role in the larger struggle over control of strategic materials that were essential to America's technological and defense capabilities. The inheritance had transformed him from an unemployed engineer into a key player in issues of national importance, with responsibilities that extended far beyond his own immediate interests. As he reviewed the options and their implications, Marcus realized that Alejandro had prepared him for exactly this moment. The technical manuals, financial resources, network relationships, and government connections were all designed to give his heir the knowledge and capabilities necessary to make informed decisions about the operation's future direction. The 48-hour deadline Sterling had imposed was approaching, and Marcus needed to choose not just between different business models, but between different visions of how strategic industries should be structured and controlled. The Golden Mirage had revealed itself to be far more than a profitable business opportunity. It was a test of whether independent alternatives could survive in industries increasingly dominated by consolidated corporate interests and foreign suppliers. The choice required balancing immediate family needs against longer-term strategic considerations, weighing the security of partnership against the value of independence, and deciding whether to preserve Alejandro's vision or adapt it to new circumstances and opportunities. The decision would define Marcus's role in continuing his great-uncle's legacy, while determining the future direction of an operation that served both commercial and national interests. The demonstration that would determine the future of the Golden Mirage operation began at dawn on the day Marcus's 48-hour deadline expired. He had made his decision during the sleepless night that followed his meeting with Elena Rodriguez, choosing a path that none of the competing interests had anticipated, but which honored both Alejandro's vision and his own understanding of what the situation required. Instead of accepting or rejecting Victoria Sterling's partnership offer privately, Marcus had decided to make the underground operation public through a carefully orchestrated demonstration that would reveal the facility's capabilities while establishing his right to operate independently. The strategy was risky, but potentially decisive, designed to create public and political support that would make suppression impossible, regardless of the consortium's resources or influence. Sofia had spent the previous evening coordinating with journalists, industry analysts, and government officials who specialized in strategic materials and supply chain security. Her social media expertise had evolved into sophisticated public relations capabilities, and she understood how to generate the kind of attention that could transform a private business dispute into a matter of public interest. Carmen had worked with the facility's automated systems to prepare a comprehensive demonstration of the rare earth element, extraction, and processing capabilities, programming displays and presentations that would make the operation's technical sophistication and strategic value clear to visitors with varying levels of technical background. The first guests to arrive were representatives from defense contractors who had been working with Alejandro's network for years. These were engineers and procurement specialists who understood the military applications of rare earth elements and could verify the quality and specifications of the materials the Golden Mirage facility produced. Mr. Rivera, this processing quality exceeds military specifications by substantial margins, announced Dr. James Patterson, a materials scientist from Lockheed Martin who had been examining samples from the facility's current production. The purity levels and elemental composition are superior to anything we typically receive from conventional suppliers. The defense contractor representatives were followed by journalists from industry publications who specialized in mining, manufacturing, and strategic materials coverage. These were reporters who understood the geopolitical implications of supply chain security and could communicate the broader significance of independent domestic production capabilities. Marcus guided the growing group of visitors through the underground facility, explaining how Alejandro had developed extraction and processing techniques that achieved superior efficiency while maintaining environmental responsibility. The demonstration showed not just that the operation worked, but that it represented technological advancement beyond what large-scale corporate facilities typically achieved. The key innovation is the modular processing system, Marcus explained to the assembled group as they observed the facility's automated operations. Instead of using massive industrial equipment that requires enormous capital investment and can only be cost-effective at huge scale, my great-uncle developed smaller, more efficient systems that can be replicated and adapted to different geological conditions. The technical presentation was interrupted by the arrival of Victoria Sterling and several associates whose expensive suits and obvious displeasure suggested they had not expected to find their private business negotiations transformed into a public demonstration. Sterling's expression combined professional frustration with barely controlled anger as she surveyed the assembled journalists and government representatives. "Mr. Rivera, this is highly irregular," Sterling said, approaching Marcus with the kind of controlled intensity that suggested serious consequences for actions she considered inappropriate. "We had an agreement for private discussions about partnership opportunities." "We had a deadline for a decision," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm providing that decision in a way that ensures all interested parties can understand the full scope of what we're discussing." The confrontation between Marcus and Sterling provided exactly the kind of dramatic tension that made the demonstration compelling for the journalists present. Here was a clear conflict between corporate interests seeking to acquire control over strategic resources and an independent operator defending his right to maintain alternatives to monopolization. Elena Rodriguez had arrived with additional Defense Department representatives who were documenting the facility's capabilities for official purposes. Their presence added government legitimacy to the demonstration while making clear that national security agencies supported independent domestic production of strategic materials. The Department of Defense has a strong interest in maintaining supplier diversity for critical materials, Rodriguez announced to the assembled group. Operations like the Golden Mirage provide exactly the kind of domestic alternatives that enhance our national security by reducing dependence on potentially unreliable foreign sources. Sterling's response revealed the true scope of the opposition Marcus was facing. Ms. Rodriguez, I think you'll find that efficient resource extraction requires substantial capital investment and regulatory compliance capabilities that individual operators simply cannot provide. The responsible approach is partnership with established organizations that have the resources and expertise to operate at the scale these markets require. The debate that followed encapsulated the fundamental disagreement about how strategic industries should be structured and controlled. Sterling argued for consolidation, efficiency, and corporate management of complex operations. Marcus and Rodriguez advocated for diversity, competition, and independent alternatives that could provide strategic flexibility and innovation. The journalists present recognized the broader implications of the conflict and began asking questions that went beyond the specific situation at the Golden Mirage to address policy issues about industrial concentration, foreign dependence, and national security priorities. Mr. Rivera, how does your operation compare to foreign suppliers in terms of cost and quality? Asked Rebecca Martinez from Industrial Minerals magazine. Marcus had prepared for exactly this question. Our processing costs are competitive with foreign suppliers, but our quality standards are significantly higher. More importantly, our domestic location eliminates supply chain vulnerabilities and political risks that come with dependence on overseas sources. The demonstration's climax came when Marcus activated a presentation that Alejandro had prepared but never used, showing the full scope of the rare earth element stockpiles that had been accumulated over years of continuous operation. The quantities were staggering, representing millions of dollars in refined materials ready for immediate delivery to American manufacturers and defense contractors. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing represents strategic materials independence, Marcus announced as displays showed inventory levels and purity specifications. These stockpiles could supply American defense and technology needs for months, providing the kind of supply security that foreign dependence simply cannot match. The financial implications were immediately clear to everyone present. The stockpiled materials alone were worth far more than Sterling's consortium had offered for the entire operation, and the ongoing production capabilities ensured continued value creation far into the future. Carmen stepped forward to provide technical details that demonstrated the sophistication of Alejandro's systems and their potential for expansion. The current facility operates at about 30% of its designed capacity. With modest investment in additional processing equipment, we could triple our output while maintaining the same quality standards and environmental compliance. The expansion potential transformed the discussion from preserving an existing operation to developing a major new domestic source of strategic materials. Marcus was offering not just independence from foreign suppliers, but the foundation for American leadership in advanced materials production. Sterling's final gambit revealed the extent to which powerful interests were willing to go to prevent independent alternatives from succeeding. Mr. Rivera, I should inform you that regulatory agencies have raised concerns about the environmental impact and permit compliance of underground extraction operations. These issues could result in immediate shutdown orders if they're not addressed through proper corporate oversight. The threat was delivered publicly, making clear that the consortium was prepared to use regulatory pressure to force compliance, regardless of the demonstration's success or the support Marcus had generated from government and industry representatives. Elena Rodriguez responded immediately, producing documents that revealed the full extent of government support for the Golden Mirage operation. Ms. Sterling, the Defense Department has completed comprehensive environmental and safety assessments of this facility. All operations meet or exceed federal standards, and the strategic value of domestic production has been formally recognized through our Critical Materials Security Program. The government endorsement neutralized Sterling's regulatory threats, while establishing that attempts to shut down the operation through bureaucratic pressure would face opposition from national security agencies. Marcus had gained the protection that independent operators needed to resist corporate consolidation efforts. The demonstration concluded with Marcus announcing his decision to maintain the Golden Mirage operation as an independent strategic materials producer while expanding its capabilities and establishing partnerships with other independent operators throughout Alejandro's network. The approach preserved independence while building the collective strength needed to compete effectively against consolidated corporate interests. The choice we face isn't between independence and partnership, Marcus told the assembled group. It's between maintaining alternatives and accepting monopolization. America's technological and defense capabilities depend on having diverse, reliable sources of strategic materials. and independent operators like the Golden Mirage provide exactly that kind of supply security. The media coverage that followed transformed Marcus's inheritance from a private family matter into a public policy success story. Articles in industry publications highlighted the technical innovations and strategic value of independent domestic production. Defense and technology reporters emphasized the national security implications of reducing foreign dependence. Business journalists documented the financial success of operations that had been dismissed as economically unviable. Sofia had coordinated social media campaigns that reached millions of people, creating public awareness of supply chain security issues and support for domestic alternatives to foreign dependence. The story of the Golden Mirage became a symbol of American innovation and strategic independence, generating political support that made corporate or regulatory suppression impossible. Within weeks of the demonstration, Marcus found himself testifying before congressional committees about strategic materials policy and supply chain security. His technical background and successful operation gave him credibility with policymakers who were increasingly concerned about industrial dependence on potentially unreliable foreign suppliers. The success attracted investment from patriotic venture capitalists and strategic materials funds that wanted to support domestic production capabilities. Unlike Sterling's consortium, these investors were aligned with Marcus's vision of maintaining independence while expanding capabilities to serve national strategic needs. Carmen had enrolled in a specialized graduate program in materials engineering, preparing to join the family operation with the advanced technical training needed to continue Alejandro's innovations. Her combination of engineering expertise and first-hand knowledge of the Golden Mirage systems positioned her to lead the next generation of technical development. Sofia had discovered a talent for strategic communications and public policy advocacy, working with other independent operators throughout Alejandro's network to coordinate their resistance to consolidation pressures. Her social media skills had evolved into sophisticated capabilities for building public support for industrial policies that favored competition over monopolization. The financial transformation exceeded Marcus's most optimistic projections. The Golden Mirage operation generated enough revenue to provide comprehensive financial security for his family, while funding expansion that would make it one of America's premier strategic materials producers. The inheritance that had seemed like a burden had become the foundation for multi-generational wealth and strategic importance. More significantly, the success had demonstrated that independent operators could not only survive, but thrive when they had the right combination of technical innovation, government support, and public awareness. The Golden Mirage became a model for other strategic materials producers who were resisting corporate consolidation while serving national security objectives. The victory over Sterling's consortium had broader implications for industrial policy and corporate consolidation trends. The public demonstration of independent success inspired policymakers to reconsider regulations that favored large corporate operations over smaller, more innovative alternatives. New policies began supporting supply chain diversity and domestic production capabilities. As Marcus stood in Alejandro's restored study, 6 months after inheriting the Golden Mirage, he reflected on how completely his understanding of the inheritance had transformed. What had appeared to be a worthless, failed casino had revealed itself to be a strategic asset worth hundreds of millions of dollars and essential to American industrial independence. The Victorian-era oil paintings on the walls now overlooked a sophisticated command center for one of America's most important strategic materials operations. The antique furniture shared space with modern computer systems that monitored global market conditions and coordinated with defense contractors and technology manufacturers throughout the country. Elena Rodriguez had become a regular visitor, working with Marcus to expand the network of independent strategic materials producers and establish new relationships with government agencies that valued supply chain security. The Defense Department's Critical Materials Security Program had grown to support dozens of independent operations that collectively provided alternatives to foreign dependence and corporate monopolization. Victoria Sterling's consortium had ultimately been forced to compete on merit, rather than relying on pressure tactics to acquire independent operations. The public failure of their attempts to force consolidation at the Golden Mirage had encouraged other independent operators to resist similar pressures, preserving the diversity that served national strategic interests. The casino's empty gaming floor had been transformed into a visitor center and educational facility, where students, policymakers, and industry representatives could learn about strategic materials production and the importance of supply chain independence. The space that had once hosted gambling now served to educate people about the industrial capabilities that underpinned American technological leadership. Carmen had completed her graduate studies and joined the operation as its chief technology officer, leading research programs that were advancing extraction and processing techniques beyond what Alejandro had achieved. Her innovations were being shared with other network members, strengthening the collective capabilities of independent strategic materials producers. Sofia had established a consulting firm that helped independent operators resist consolidation pressures while building public support for policies that favored competition and diversity in strategic industries. Her expertise in communications and public policy had become valuable to operators throughout the network who faced similar challenges. The family dining table in Alejandro's apartment now hosted regular strategy sessions with other network members, government representatives, and industry partners who were working to maintain American leadership in strategic materials production. The conversations that took place there influenced policy decisions that affected the entire industry. The financial success had exceeded every projection, generating wealth that provided comprehensive security for Marcus's family while funding continued expansion and innovation. The operation that had been worth $15 million annually under Alejandro's management was generating over $50 million annually and growing rapidly as new contracts and capabilities were added. The strategic impact was even more significant than the financial success. The Golden Mirage and its network partners were reducing American dependence on foreign suppliers while providing the high-quality materials needed for advanced defense and technology applications. The operation served national security objectives while proving that independent alternatives could compete successfully against consolidated corporate interests. Marcus had inherited more than a business or even a fortune. He had inherited a responsibility to continue Alejandro's vision of maintaining industrial alternatives that served both commercial and strategic objectives. The success of that vision was transforming American industrial policy while providing a model for other countries that wanted to maintain strategic independence. The Golden Mirage Casino had revealed its true nature through Marcus's courage to resist pressure and maintain independence. What had appeared to be a worthless relic of failed gambling ambitions was actually the foundation for one of America's most important strategic capabilities, disguised as decay, but ready to emerge when the right person had the vision and determination to claim its potential. The inheritance had taught Marcus that the most valuable legacies often come disguised as burdens, requiring faith and persistence to reveal their true worth. Alejandro's gift was not just wealth and opportunity, but the chance to serve purposes larger than personal success while building capabilities that would benefit future generations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.